All right, welcome back to the Morning Show right here on the Rise News channel. President Muhammadu Buhari has asked the Senate to approve a fresh $800 million loan from the World Bank to enable his administration sustain its social investment program for poor and vulnerable Nigerians. This comes also as the Director General of Budget Office of the Federation, Mr. Ben Akabweze, raised the alarm that the national debt is becoming unsustainable.
Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are watching from. I am Okocha P. Marcel and this is my channel. About a week ago, Buhari concluded borrowing 27 trillion naira. And this is about 17 days to go. He is requesting a fresh $800 million. And a lot of people are saying that this is going to plunge the country into the crisis, especially when Muhammadu Buhari have said that after his retirement that he is going to go to Niger Republic. What is the cause of this consistent borrowing? And what are they using the money for? And Buhari's government have been indicted by the House of Representatives that they have spent 1 trillion naira that they cannot account for. And that is corruption in the highest order. On our Rise News, a guest have this to say. Listen.
Well, the state of debt and revenue is something that is very scary. It's like an economy that is almost on the brink. An economy that is probably grappling with problem of insolvency. That is the situation. Because we are gradually getting to a position where we use our entire revenue to service debt. We are almost at that threshold. And the situation may even get worse because as at the end of 2022, the public debt was 46 trillion. Now, with the securitization of the ways and means, we have been told by the DMO that we'll be talking about something close to 77 trillion. And between January and now, there also have been all manner of borrowings either from CBN or whatever. So by the end of this year, we probably will be getting close to almost 80 trillion. Now, even before the securitization, in the 2023 budget, the component of the budget was about 6.3 trillion. Total revenue was about 10 trillion. And don't forget, we hardly ever achieve 100% performance in revenue. So you have to discount that maybe by 20 or 30%. So it's really a very, very scary situation. And certainly, we cannot afford to continue this way. Something needs to happen very quickly, very urgently, so that the entire system doesn't collapse. So it's a very disturbing situation. The way it is, maybe by the end of this year, perhaps our debt service component spending will be getting close to 10 trillion. That is the way it is. And unfortunately, most of these borrowings are not as transparent as they should be. Because annually we have the budget that are presented, we have the details provided by the minister. In none of these documents are some of these details stated, particularly this borrowing from the central bank. Because normally we have subheads on the amount of deficit and how the deficit will be financed from domestic sources and from foreign sources. In none of the documents over the years has it been reflected that so much is coming from the central bank. And yet we have something to the level of almost 23 trillion cumulatively. That is scary. And if you look at even the data as at February this year of central bank, of bank credit to government, which is essentially borrowing from the central bank, is showing about 28 trillion as of February. Although it went slightly down in March to about 27 trillion. So we need to do something very, very seriously and very fundamentally about the fiscal operations of government so that we don't end up with the IMF. Because if we end up with the IMF, it will be a completely different story. That will even be a more complicated matter to handle.
All right. Dr. Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us today and for painting the picture which you've described as a scary outlook on our debt profile. But beyond that, there's a request for even more loans. You know, yesterday and during the introduction, Rufai had mentioned that the president had written to the Senate to approve a fresh loan of $800 million from the World Bank. And he said he justified this loan saying that it was going to be used to enhance or to fund the National Social Safety Net project, whereby 10.2 million households would receive 5,000 naira monthly for the next 6 months. The first question I'd ask is that 17 days now to the end of his tenure, why this borrowing?
Well,
is it justified?
Well, generally in governance, we reckon with the fact that government is a continuum. It's like a relay race. Wherever the current administration stops, the incoming administration will take over. But for something as fundamental as this, I'm talking of the borrowing plan or borrowing or whatever, I don't think it's difficult to justify that just few days to the end of the administration is making a request for this. I think my own belief or my submission will be that all of this story or this idea of $800 million either for subsidy or social investment, I think we should hold on to everything. And we should allow the incoming administration to deal with all of these issues. The issue of subsidy, because the way it is, the subsidy problem has become a cross that has been passed over or that will be carried by the incoming administration. So the incoming administration, by now, I expect, should have prepared a strategy. Because this is not just dropping from the moon or somewhere. It's something that we foresee. So the incoming administration should have by now have a strategy of how to deal with it. Because we don't have the time. So it is better left for the incoming administration to deal with. And in any case, initially, the Minister of Finance said the money was for palliatives.
Yes.
Now, we have had subsidy removals in the past. We had it during, I think it was the Abacha regime, when the Petroleum Trust Fund was created. And it was President Buhari, current president, that was made the chairman of the Petroleum Trust Fund at that time. And the whole idea at that time was, if you remove subsidy, you make savings. And it is from the savings that you fund whatever palliatives that you want to undertake. That was the framework that was used during the Abacha regime for the PTF, Petroleum Trust Fund. The same thing under President Jonathan. We had the subsidy removal. Then the savings from the subsidy removal was used to fund the Shopee, which was the palliatives under Jonathan. So if we are going to remove subsidy, we are expecting that we should be able to annually, and at the very minimum, we should be able to make a savings of 6 to 7 trillion naira. So what is the logic of going to borrow, especially now that the debt situation is getting to a very frightening level? So I don't think, first, there's a basis for the borrowing. Secondly, I don't think it is the business of the current administration to embark on this new borrowing. It's completely unnecessary. I think by now, what should be happening is just rounding up things, giving us a balance sheet of what they have done and all of that, an account of what they have done and rounding up things, not engaging in such major transactions or business as this kind of borrowing. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. There's been a regular refrain, and I deliberately asked the first question about debt and revenue. The CBN balance sheet. You want to talk more as regards that? You know, there's been a particular refrain about people even need to see the CBN balance sheet, you know, to be able to ascertain what is going on as regards the debt itself, because people feel we don't even know what's going on. And vis-a-vis the fact that because of this same subsidy, the NNPC in a while has not remitted money to the Federation account. So who is even given that level of accountability to be able to introspect into what the NNPC is doing, unless even ascertain how much they are making and how much they're expending on the subsidy, and how much liters are they even subsidizing for every single day, and the knock-on cost every month?
Well, as for the CBN balance sheet, I'm not sure we have much information, because I'm not even sure whether we have seen any audited accounts of the central bank in the last 3-4 years. I'm not sure. I think we can validate that, but I'm not sure that it's in public space. So if you don't have that kind of financial disclosure publicly, I think it's something that we need to worry about as far as transparency in governance is concerned. Yes, the CBN has consistently touted this idea of autonomy and all of that. But sometimes it carries this argument about autonomy, it carries it too far. I think there should be disclosure. So that is, for me, is a major issue. And when there is no disclosure, you give opportunities for all manner of, insinuations, conjecture. People draw all manner of conclusions. So that's a major issue with financial disclosure, audited accounting statements by the central bank. I'm not sure that has been done in the last few years. It's time to be corrected, though. As far as the NNPC is concerned, the NNPC, I think, is even a bit more open, because under the current GMD, I think we have seen quite a number of accounts published. Well, I'm not an accountant, but maybe accountants will be able to interrogate further the quality of the statement. But at least we have something in public space to say that, okay, this is a statement, particularly now they are talking about going public. So we have seen some traction in terms of openness and transparency in what the NNPC does. But the challenge with the subsidy thing is that there are too many loose ends around it. Around the entire chain. Both the importation, the marketing, the distribution, all this swap and all of that. And when you have too many loose ends, it makes the system itself very vulnerable. Because there is a limit to which you can police all these ends. There is a limit to which you can be everywhere. That is why, we have argued, some of us have argued that it is better to do away completely with this subsidy, so that you can have a clearer picture of what is happening in the NNPC, especially around this subsidy thing. You can have a clearer picture as to the amount that you are consuming. We have more players in the space. We have a market, a full-fledged market environment, which will be easier to monitor. But the way it is, this is extremely difficult. And there's a limit to which even all the security agencies can do, because sometimes when you expose them to too much of temptation, they also become part of the problem. Because to investigate areas in which there is so much money and all of that, like this subsidy thing, is an extremely difficult thing. Extremely difficult. Because there are too many temptations. And those who are investigating invariably also begin to compromise. So I think the fundamental way to do with this thing is to completely remove the subsidy platform, so that we can have clarity, clear vision, and better accountability in that sector. And the country will get much better value. The governors and all of them, they'll be able to engage the NNPC better. You will invite accountants, do proper forensic analysis or audit of the system. So I think for me, that is the way to go, particularly now that we are struggling with fiscal sustainability. We are struggling with debt sustainability. And these things, it's a vicious circle. The more you run into the problem of debt, the more your deficit grows, the more you go and borrow. And when you are under so much pressure, it's very easy to go to the central bank. And we begin that cycle of, heating up the economy again. Because when we talk about all this inflation problem, exchange rate problem, it is very easy to be blaming COVID, blaming Ukraine and all of that. But the fact is that the rate at which the CBN is pumping money into the system is a major factor. I mean, you're pumping so much liquidity, then you now go back and start saying that you are tightening monetary policy, which is an inherent contradiction. So we need to deal with this and come up with reforms to deal with issues of fiscal sustainability.
All right.
Of financial consolidation, fiscal consolidation. That is it. So the incoming administration should begin to look at those solutions because we don't have time. We should begin to look at those solutions.
All right, sir.
How do we do and who do we need to engage?
All right. Dr. Yusuf, thank you very much for talking about fiscal sustainability and your thoughts on removal of subsidy. Despite your recommendations this morning, the federal government has said that they won't be removing subsidy under this current administration. So they've passed the burden to the next administration. And of course, they have only a few more days to go. So when we look at the economy, our eyes would be on the next administration as to their policies, the agenda to restore the economy. And so I know that you would have some recommendations in terms of priority areas for the new administration. You've spoken about the federal government's fiscal policy, sustainability measures in terms of tax increases and the import duties. You've criticized that as to how it will hurt the economy. Are there some priority areas you feel the incoming administration should prioritize in order to restore the economy?
Well, I think the priority areas are, first, we should have a good team that will manage the economy. And a team that will be given some space to be able to do a good work in terms of fixing the economy. We should have an economic management system that will not be vulnerable to, patronage, influence, political interference, and all of that. Because those things affect the quality of economic governance. We should not have an economy that is dominated by political patronage. I want to see very minimum political influence in the management of economic affairs. And we should have a very strong economic advisory council. That is one. In terms of specifics, we have to deal with this subsidy problem. It's a problem that is big and we need to deal with urgently. Because if we are already in a situation where you practically don't have revenue that you can use freely to fund the operations of government, you have to deal with this revenue, with this subsidy. Of course, I agree it may not be practical to just jump into the administration and begin to remove the subsidy. But I believe that we can begin, at least within the first 3 months, to do a phased removal of the subsidy. That is one. Secondly, we need to put in place some structures that will enable this subsidy removal to happen. Because you can't just remove subsidy like that. You need to create environments to minimize the shock on the citizens. And I'm not talking just about handouts. I'm talking about using policies and other things to create an environment to be able to make it easy for this transition to happen. We must see much more competition in this petroleum downstream sector. Because the situation is this bad because we are dealing with a monopoly situation. It's only the NNPC that is making petroleum products available. And once you have a monopoly situation, you are bound to have all manner of abuses. So we need to see competition in that space. We need to see a level playing field in that space. And we need to quickly reform the foreign exchange market or foreign exchange policy. You cannot have an economy where some people have access to foreign exchange, others don't have access to official foreign exchange. It's a major problem for the economy. So the CBN should decide which one it wants to do under the incoming administration, and the incoming administration needs to also make its position very clear. We cannot continue to run this economy with the current foreign exchange policy regime. It simply cannot work. So that has to change. Then we need to look at the total gamut of our tax system. We should not continue to pile pressure on the few people that are paying the taxes. That is one big problem that we have. And to make matters worse, under the recent fiscal policy document that was released by the finance minister, a lot of taxes are being imposed on those who are in production. If there is any segment of the economy today that is suffering under all manner of pressures, foreign exchange issue, energy costs, issues of the ports, issues of high interest rate, it is those who are in production. So why will you sit down as a government and now be introducing new taxes on that segment of the economy? You are not just taxing their profit, you are taxing the output. That is what all this, that is the challenge we have with this fiscal policy measure that was just introduced by government. When you begin to impose tax on output, the value of the output, that is what the excise duty is doing. The ad valorem tax and this specific tax on both the brewery industry, the non-alcoholic drinks, tobacco, and the rest of them. If you cannot help those in production, we should not add more to them, more problems to what they are grappling with. So we need to look at the tax system itself and come up with more creative ways, first, of ensuring that we have more people in the tax net rather than imposing additional burden on the very few that are already in the tax net. Secondly, to be looking more in the direction of indirect tax. So that people pay, according to, we can look at all sorts of options that will not hit the poor that much. And we should be looking at the vulnerable segments of the society. To support them is not just by giving handouts. Let us look at what they are consuming. We are looking at food, we are looking at transportation, we are looking at health, we are looking at education. This is what they are spending money on. What specific policies can we bring to mitigate the pressure in those areas? We can deploy fiscal policies like tariffs, import duties. If we need to wait for some products so that the poor, at least we have some relief, we should do that. Then, of course, we need to address the issue of all these leakages in oil and gas sector. Apart from the subsidy problem, there's a whole lot that is happening in the upstream. All this oil theft. There was a time the GMD reported that we are losing 400 billion every month to oil theft. Okay. Luckily, we have some traction in terms of, ensuring better security, but I'm not sure whether that is being sustained. Okay. Because we need to bring some sanity into that space. Okay. We need to ensure that we attract more investment. Okay. We have lost so many investors in our oil and gas sector. Okay. At a time like this, most of the oil producing countries are making a lot of money. Okay, quickly. Their reserves are overflowing. The exchange rate is getting stronger. Quickly. But the opposite is what is happening here. Can you hear me, sir, in 1 minute? For a new government coming in, what are 3 quick sectors that we can use to ramp up governmental revenue to at least over $20 to $30 billion in 1 minute? 3 key quick sectors. Well, it is not a matter of sector. It's a matter of what policies can we tweak. The first thing to do, and from where you can unlock minimum of 4 trillion, is to remove the foreign exchange subsidy. The subsidy problem is not only in oil and gas, it's also in foreign exchange. How can you you have a government foreign exchange of about 20 billion annually, and you are putting it in the market at 460? You are losing almost 6 trillion. How do you sell foreign exchange at 460 when you can sell it at 650, when you can sell it at 700? And you now leave the gap for some people to just be milking and be making easy money. These are money that should come into the federation account and make sure that a lot of people, you know, all these tiers of government benefit from it. That's a low-hanging fruit for me. Then we can look some of specific taxes that we can quickly review. I don't want to go into specific, but there are taxes that you can review that are easier to administer and that can bring in more money. Then, of course, if we're able to exit from the subsidy, we should be able to unlock annually minimum of 7 trillion naira. Then if you create the right environment for investment to come in, particularly by making sure we reform the foreign exchange policy, once investment grows, revenue will grow. This is a positive correlation. But when you have a foreign exchange policy that is making it difficult for capital to even come into the economy, how do you want to make progress with the economy? So for me, these are low-hanging fruits that we can deal with. Then going forward, medium term, long term, we can begin to deal with security issues, structural issues, and all of that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, for your time with us this morning, examining the economy, especially with regards to our debt profile in Nigeria.